Right, what's your second tip you've got for us?
So the tip is find a tool that tells you what's really happening. And concretely, it's like use a question, use an assessment, use a survey to find out what people are really thinking.
Ooh.
And this is something that's obsessed me throughout my career. So as a new teacher, I just desperately wanted to know what's going on in my students' heads. And the first thing I tried was coloured cups. And I know we sort of look down on that nowadays. But actually it was amazing. Once I trained my students up in using them, which took quite a long time, I could look around the whole room and say, well, like, who's happy? Who thinks they're struggling? Who thinks they need help now? And instead of having to go around and ask them and stop everyone, it was just there in front.
Just tell us how coloured cups work, if that's all right.
So you've got I mean, this is a Dylan William formative assessment back in the day thing. You've got three. You've got a green cup, an orange cup, and a red cup. So I had to buy coloured cups off Amazon or whatever it was. Each student's got three in front of them. You start out on green, and if you're like, I'm not sure how it's going, you take the green one off and put the amber one on top. And if you're totally stuck and you want help now, it goes to red. And I mean, as you can imagine, particularly teaching history and seeing students 3 times a week, it took some time I want help now. But actually, once we've gotten used to it, it was that ability to just see what 25, 30 people are thinking simultaneously was great. I went from there to Hinge questions, and I suspect I don't need to plug the website Diagnostic Questions.
It never does any harm, Harry, but yeah, no, that's we let
okay, well, so if you're not familiar with Hinge questions, Diagnostic Questions, multiple choice question, where each answer demonstrates a misconception, and so if I'm asking pupils, like, which of these coins is worth the most, I'm going to have a 2p, and I'm going to have a 1p, and I'm going to have a 5p, and like, one misconception is likely to be 2p's the most valuable. We're talking young pupils here. 2p's the most valuable because it's the biggest. And so a Hinge question will allow you to know exactly what your students are thinking. And then if you want the fractal element, I think the same thing again applies with staff, and that is what I do now. So I did a survey of staff once a week for a school leader last year, which I thought was going to be for my PhD. And every couple of weeks he'd be like, this is so useful, just being able to pick up the issues and act on them straight away. And basically he said enough times that I quit my job, went to work for Teacher Tapp, because I'm like, I think this is a thing that if school leader, like, there's staff know what's going on, and staff know whether or not a policy's working, and it's quite hard, particularly in a secondary school, even if you're like, my door's always open and wandering around all the time, to really know what's going on. And so this idea of actually, if you're a teacher, you need a question, and if you're a school leader, you need some kind of question that's going to allow you to pick up really quickly, like, what are people unhappy about? Is the new policy working? How our policy says no 1 meeting a week. How many meetings did you actually go to last week? That kind of thing. And that then provides leaders the information they need to make good decisions.
That's amazing, Harry. Right, just a couple of things on that. So, I'm as you are, I'm obsessed with formative assessment. I think the more I think about it, I think there's kind of 3 phases to formative assessment. There's coming up with a good question, which is hard enough. If that question's rubbish or assesses the wrong thing, which often happens, you're asking for a bit of trouble. Then you need your means of kind of collecting in the information from kids, and again, it may be diagnostic questions with ABCD cards or mini whiteboards or whatever it may be. And then I think the hardest bit, and often is overlooked, is then the responding to that, because it's one thing asking the question, getting the results, and responding. In your kind of experience of using formative assessment yourself and also working with other teachers who are using it, does it feel right that they're the kind of 3 components of it? And do you see, is there one of those areas that teachers tend to kind of focus more on at the expense of others?
I think it's I think you're right. I mean, I think it's also worth thinking about like the planning aspect beforehand of like, well, what are the key things that we want to be responding around before we even get to the questions. I'd hesitate to say that any one thing is neglected, but I definitely think if you think of that progression, there's I'm interested in formative assessment. I've designed my Hinge question. I've got done my Hinge question. What on earth am I going to do with all these responses? And so there's definitely and this is another good example of like this less is more thing. You could have a session on Hinge questions, go away and write Hinge questions, but actually what you really want is a session on Hinge questions, go away and then like, okay, a whole session on what, now I've realised half of my students have no idea what I was talking about. What am I going to do about it? I do think this is one where actually we can plan around it, and particularly if we think about colleagues who are new to a subject or new to a topic or new to the profession. So if I come out with a basic maths misconception for you, you'll have in your sort of back of your mind 7 different examples you could give me. Whereas actually if I come up with a maths misconception to a new teacher, they are going to have that like, And so making sure that somewhere in our curricular documents there's like, here are the 5 most likely misconceptions, and here's one thing you could say, even if it's just one thing you could say if they think that, so we can prepare. Being responsive doesn't mean you have to make it all up on the hop. You can prepare your responsiveness as well.
Absolutely. And the only other thing I wanted to mention, but again, feel free to dig deeper. I don't know if we're going to talk Teacher Tapp any further in some of your other tips, but it feels to me that that's like the world's best assessment for learning tool for, either school leaders or whoever it may be. It must be just amazing, just kind of thinking of the questions, analysing the response and so on. So it sounds like a dream job, Harry.
I get to work with Becky Allen and Laura McInerney, so that's a pretty good start. But it is that capacity to find out what the whole profession is thinking overnight. And sometimes it's just scratching an itch.
Yes.
Like, how many people we have all these kind of like, what are teachers doing? Well, I think this and I think that, and that capacity to be able to find out there and then. So if you don't have the app on your phone,
nice,
get it on your. Search for Teacher Tapp, 2 P's in Tap, and get it now. And if you're interested in these school leader stuff, you can get in touch with me.
I just put you on the spot, Harry. Feel free to dodge this one. In your relatively short time working at Teacher Tapp, have you had a favourite question or a favourite response? Anything that springs to mind there?
So I guess I'm quite interested in and proud of. We've asked a load of questions about the early career framework recently, essentially because everyone I was talking to in schools was telling me interesting things about it. We've not yet released our findings. We've done a big thing where we've surveyed mentors, we've surveyed leaders, and we've surveyed early career teachers. And I hope that will be quite interesting for the profession in making a change, which I think there's a lot of good in it, but there have been tricky elements, and trying to make that a little bit better. That's not a straight answer, but yeah, I think there's a lot in
I like
that.
it. Fantastic.